Hi. Good morning. Good dawn. How are we today? It is, Zerlath Eternal, and giving you another commuting drive stream situation. So I'm, thinking to myself about what kind of circumstance America's going through. We are hysterically blind to our own behavior, right? Because as long as we can rationalize it, then it can't possibly be the wrong answer. All rationalized answers are the correct answer. This is kind of like the world we're living in, right? Meaning that, like, it doesn't matter how you do something. It depends on what the structure of what you're doing is. Everybody wants to throw the fascism word around in the political sense of the word, meaning that they're talking about the corporate state hybrid theory, right? Where basically you treat citizens regardless of whether they are doing a job for someone or not, as if they're working at a corporation, right? You know, you have people living by corporate policy for the betterment of the company. And so the problem with that is, or the problem with having a problem with that is that you assume that X always leads to Y, always leads to Z, right? Like, if you do things this way, they will go this way. And this is, we're having trouble talking to ourselves about what is happening in the West, because we love to play with our definition of words. We would rather go through hell feeling like we were right than use correct terminology to frame your real issue correctly, so that way you don't see it in the world, right? You become an ideologue when the consequences don't matter anymore, right? If you don't care that the consequences of your better world leads to death, right? But if somebody else's ideals lead to death before they get good, then they're the bad guy, right? Fascism got labeled onto the terminology for the merger of corporation and state because all the examples we could find of the state and corporations being one and the same were of a fascist quality from where that term came from pre-industrial era, which we all... There we go. There we go. There we go. I don't know how long that was. Hey, what's up, Nicholas? Hi, Edgar and Amy. Do I know you, Amy? Amy's Kitchen. I feel like I met you somewhere in a thing. Or are we complete strangers and I don't know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so yeah, so when you're watching all of these TV shows with the dictatorship, the basic run-of-the-mill dictatorship, typically with a black-red, maybe black-red-white motif, with your oversimplified, postmodern-looking symbolism, flag, right? That certain kind of tasteless, imposing architecture of an industrial machine nature that makes you feel like you've got this powerful, strong civilization. This is what was happening. And so, yeah, all of that is fascism. You could apply that to communism. You can apply that to capitalism. You can apply that to socialism, which is exactly what we have seen with what Antifa does, right? Antifa is a fascist means to socialism. It's a culturally liberal... It's a culturally liberal brown shirts apparatus of a fascist movement. Because the only way your socialism works, it's just like you're describing the merger of corporation and state without calling it that. You're just explaining away where the money is coming from, right? Which and in your imagination, that's free money, meaning that there's no cost unto you, meaning that there is no work or labor or charge unto you. But no, there is. 2020 was one of those due dates for the cost of your free shit from the corporate state that you had established well before the Don came in. Right? So if you want to, unfortunately where things now are the product of a continued inability to talk to each other, which is designed this way to further alienate the ideals of liberal America and conservative America on completely tangential conversations where words don't have meaning between the two anymore. And then to make the matter worse, one side is operating off of a state-backed curriculum. And because the other side is partly responsible for that state-backed curriculum that it now has second thoughts on, it's caught in a place in between approval of ideas and disapproval of ideas, as it tries to have a healthier, stronger determination of what is not propaganda that needs to be kept, that is mixed in with propaganda or has been propagated, instead of being a part of your education, your mental development, knowledge and ability development process in our way of life, right? So I find it strange that we can sit there and we can stare at the acts of the administration, and you see, we live in a low trust society. So the idea now is not that the government is going to be some dictator, but that the government will not stand in the way of the petty tyrants across the land, right? Oh, we've destroyed the Department of Education, so now your parents can tyrannize you. That's ultimately what the world is trying to say right now, is that the family unit is the tyrant. That's what it means to say that the implosion of the Department of Education is tyranny. Right? And then they just have to pick their issue that sounds good, which also has nothing to do with educational process and procedure. It only has to do with the political socio-dynamics and telling people the manner in which they are to treat one another. And that's it. It's all a social conditioning program, which is which people don't understand is kind of an abject disregard for our First Amendment, right? And there and says the American Constitution is fascist. But whenever we live by our Constitution, it's considered fascist, right? And you'll notice that the Democrat Party never brings up the Constitution except to protect itself. They have an inverted view of the Republic in which the Constitution only applies to the elected officials, when it's the other way around. The elected official is not supposed to have all these rights. They are, they're held to a certain standard because of trust, because we trust them with national secrets. We trust them with national accounts, right? You know, money handling and things like this. These are all big responsibilities that a short or long-term member of our legislative system operate. And it's Nancy Pelosi, when she's Speaker of the House for fucking ever, trying to be some sort of de facto anti-president during the first Trump administration. Like, she would wear the fasci lapel pin. That's how proud she was of the browbeating authority of the House of Representatives. She would have this big, obnoxious gold fasci pin. It's a pin of the fasci. She's saying, I am an agent of fascism. Right there. Fucking there. And you fucking ignore it. You don't fucking just wear that because you're a girl and you think it looks nice and you're an old lady. It's your old lady. No. That is... You are dressing yourself in esoteric symbolism deliberately. You're not allowed to be that ignorant. If you're that ignorant, you should be fucking withdrawn from office immediately for incompetence. You know, your head being examined for not knowing these fucking things, growing up where you grew up. Right? But as a whole, you sit there, you look at those fasci stick that sit up there because, like, they're all over the legislator. So yeah, I mean, you could theoretically say that this is the place where we cultivate the fascia of the nation, right? Because you're binding Congress together by law. right? You're finding those common bonds to bound your sticks together to inherently reinforce their strength. This is fascism. That's fascism, right? And this is the purpose of implementing the tactics of threats, violence, and coercion. Fascism as a tactical approach. Name a system of government that doesn't do this. All government is fascist. All government is slavery. It's the way it is. Anytime you've got a standing army in a nation, and that standing army's job is to point its guns at its people, if you treat your police, if you make police out of your internal domestic security, who are trained to point their gun at people, at their own people, then that's for fascism, right? That's what it's doing. That's what it's doing, right? Now, naturally, we also live in a very antagonistic world. So sometimes an internal security officer who unfortunately has to be a policy enforcement agent is put in a spot where, whether you like it or not, he's going to point his gun at you because you're a threat to him unprovocated. Because, listen, dude, we see plenty of instances where one side provokes the other. The cop provokes the citizen, or the citizen provokes the cop. Provocation is not what the cop is there for, and unfortunately the cop is there because sometimes citizens provocate, which is why we agree that we need to have some sort of internal security force that's above board. But unfortunately, they're mixed in with the corporate state, and thus the policy enforcement agent we call police. Police, polite, politic, body politic, enforcer politic. And that's what makes the police ugly, is that you lose a political debate on the social stratum of things. And then you have a cop that does their job based on the social stratum of things. Sometimes it's just a money issue, and sometimes it's not even a devastating money issue. But that's what fucking happens. Sometimes they're following orders that are devastating to a person. The absurdity of the rationalized crime, the non-crime crime. Which was why I fought forever on marijuana legalization. To me, I looked at it as a very binding mechanism. It was one of the laws that was a major thread for fascist binding in the modern world. I can see clearly now how that operates, how it divides. And this all stems forth from understanding what cannabis is and how your relationship with it is going to evolve in that context. Whether you're avoiding it or not, realizing how wrong it looks, right? Because we eventually came to that place where it was just like you're arresting somebody for carrying a plant that comes from nature and grows out of the ground, right? And eventually we just kept repeating that because we've been living in that world. We've been living in the world where, Monsanto would would do some bullshit and pollute somebody else's crop with their seed, their genetically modified seeds, especially like the soybean, and then they would use those genetic markers to sue the farmer for growing their. So it's just like, you fucking put it. I didn't even want that there, right? And now the fucking farmer's getting sued because he didn't fucking know. Because he didn't know there was a law like that, and all that was to protect the corporation and the big engine. Yeah, that's fascist. We've been fascist. You're complaining about Trump now? You're complaining? Where were you? Where were you in the Eisenhower administration? Where were you ever? Where were you ever in the history of politics? Don't act like you fucking care. You ain't spent the fucking time to fucking build the words to articulate it. You just like to fucking get up to go to work in the morning and complain. It's like, they're gonna put us all in chains. They're gonna, look at this. There's gonna be only white people in this country now. That's it. That's all it sounds like. It just sounds like crotchety old man yells at clown. As you live in this weird world where yesterday, if you said the Nazis, everybody fucking acknowledged the 5-alarm fire. Speaking of which, I see a squad car, but he's 2 cars behind me. I don't think he's got anything to do with me. Let's see what's up. Yeah, he's not even trying to follow anybody. He's on his way to something. He's on his way. All right, you do no harm. Stand in honor. I had a little car accident, like, I don't know, almost a month ago. And, the cop that I had to interact with for insurance purposes, I had to get 1 citation for swerving out. But you know what? I confess to that. Accidents are a funny little thing. It's better just to do, right? Because there's still natural law going on, even when a cop shows up. Even knowing what you know about a cop. There's still natural law in place. And things need to be fixed, for sure. And, that fight against the misplaced will of the people, right? Like when we talk, I talk about will a decent amount from the magic side of my thoughts, and that also involves things like collective will, which is why I do things like this, which is to bring collective will into the world, to add to it, to budge things the way they need to go, while as long as we still don't know how to have a better system, a better state, right? It feels entirely irrelevant whether you can, quote, trust the government or the suits that are chosen for them. But sometimes there's a tremendous psychic force that is bigger than it all. There's a lot of things. You have to be congruent with the psyche of your nation in order for your shit to work. Nobody wants to admit that the nation didn't feel like it voted for the guy before this guy. Nobody wanted to admit that. Which is why literally everything he did that wasn't already baked into the cake prior failed. Everything that he did. Because the only thing that mattered was putting him and his people in place. And then they're sitting in place running a system that nobody wants. Except for big cities. Nobody wanted it except for big cities. And the big cities didn't know what they really wanted. They just think they know what they didn't want. And then all of that is just a big lie anyway, because you're acquiesced all of your personal responsibility and power into these figures. Right? I could vote if I wanted to. I don't do that anymore. I didn't vote in 22. I didn't vote in 24. You know, I didn't vote in 28. No, I did. No, I didn't vote in 2014. I didn't vote in 2014, and then I was shocked because, like everybody else, I was impressed with what I was seeing, and it gave me some temporary faith. And then 2020, I voted because I said to myself, you know, this is a real thing that's happened, and I'm seeing very clear intent. Like, I still think we would have been possibly better off, right? If things had kept going with Don, regardless of what Don started. Only because I definitely didn't want to see things go that way. And, right? And that was a major part, because by 2020, the world only really had like 2 or 3 subjects that it actually gave a fuck about. It was pandemic conversation. It was racial and gender conversation. And it was a foreign policy involving the Russia situation. And that was largely it. That was it. That was like the only fucking things anybody gave 2 fucks about. Maybe a little bit of immigration. But it was really mostly, pandemic. Because, we were still in absolute dystopian lockdown mode. And what can't be denied is that Trump and the Republicans, they wanted this thing to be over 2 weeks to a month. And it was the Democrats and the neocons, they wanted it to go on forever as new reality. And that was literally the rhetoric that was at play in the ballot box for this bullshit. So you tell me who's the goddamn fucking fascists, right? I mean, all right, we get hyperbolic about the lesser of 2 evils, and there's always some good or evilness going on in all these things. So let's face it, nobody, people are fine with evil, they're just not fine with fascism. So, who's the lesser fascist? Now that we've had this nice, long, heart-to-heart conversation about fascism. All right? Because we can talk about history all we want, and just because somebody has nationalist ideas doesn't mean they want to hurt anybody in the process. But we are dealing with a reality that is contentious and conflicting. And somebody may want to get physically violent about another person's ideas. And when things have to change because you're surrounded by the pain of the way things keep going. Like, this is what was going on. People want to imagine that the fleecing of America is a wild figment of their imagination. That's a big part of this this argument, is that we're We're hallucinating America being this fucking place. Alright? So, if we're able to continually have an open conversation about these things as is, hopefully we can clear enough air to eventually get to rational minds finding out real truth and making productive change. But until then, be prepared for war. Alright, I'll catch you guys later.